It's time to lock in my Game Week 12 team selection, and my transfers could be anything from one free transfer to a -4. And of course, we had the big decision on who to captain: Mo Salah, Cole Palmer, or maybe a differential. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, and of course, smash that subscribe button. The content is going to be ridiculous over the next month with all of these deadlines. So enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, a quick look at how my team is looking going into Game Week 12 without any transfers made. And the main reason why I want to do this is to give you a quick update on the injury status of those players that are currently yellow flagged. Because as you can see, I've got quite a lot of them in my team. Now, of course, we will have some press conferences later on today, so keep an eye on those. Hopefully, we will give you an update on those later on as well. But first and foremost, Trent. Now, we really haven't had anything regarding Trent over this international break, but we know that it was a hamstring injury. And if it was my guess, I do think that he will be ruled out for Game Week 12. And even if he isn't officially ruled out, with the busy schedule that Liverpool do have and some tricky fixtures on the horizon, I think this is the perfect game away against Southampton for Arne Slot to play Connor Bradley. So if you have Trent, even if it is positive news, I would still expect his minutes to be 0 or very, very limited in Game Week 12. Hence why I'm planning to sell him this game week. Now, in terms of the other players right now, we did get a Brentford training video and it had Mbeumo and Visser featuring, so I do think we're quite bullish on the minutes of both of those. I probably would say Mbeumo's minutes is probably going to be way more locked than that of Visser, just because Visser has historically been a bit of a minutes risk. So Visser and Mbeumo I do think will be fine. And of course, Cole Palmer, the other big yellow flag, but we have seen him pictured in training. I think he's going to be absolutely fine. We need to remember he finished the game pretty much in Game Week 11. He's had the whole international break off. I think Cole Palmer is going to be absolutely fine, and we can confidently put the captain on him if you want to in terms of minutes. The other player that I don't have in my team, but is a consideration to buy, is going to be Bukayo Saka. Now, again, this is one that is massively up in the air because we've had Arsenal training videos and pictures. He hasn't been in any of them. We know that Arteta likes to lie. That is just what he does. So we will have the press conference today, and he will probably tell us that he might be available, he might be not. So we have to make our own judgments. The only good thing is that the Arsenal game is a 3 p.m. kickoff. Now, it isn't the lunchtime, but we might get some team news between now and that deadline. So if you are going to be bringing in someone like Bukayo Saka, I would probably try and wait until the last minute just in case we get any news about that team. But with Zinchenko coming out and saying that Arteta does little things to make teams think that the other players are playing, like bringing wash bags even though they're injured, I don't think we'll get any concrete news between now and then. So that's a quick update. I've covered this on my previous videos. Let's get into my transfers. So I've spoken about this on my previous videos. Selling Son is one of the 2 transfers that I am potentially making, but there are a few caveats that we quickly need to discuss. I won't go into detail about the stats because I've done that in the previous video and I touched on the fixtures. I just want to quickly do a 1-minute overview of my thoughts now of these 3 players, because Son to Bruno, Odegaard or Saka has been on my radar for the last 2 weeks now. So I think in terms of a safe, sensible move, Son to Saka makes a lot of sense long term. However, I do feel like I can't confidently make that move unless we get some sort of positive update, whether it be a journalist telling us that Saka's fit or Arteta giving us some positive news. I think the game against Nottingham Forest doesn't feel like a game where Arsenal could win 3 or 4-0, whereas a player like Son, who end of the day is the one that I'm selling, would I be surprised if Spurs were to score 2 goals against Man City? I wouldn't be. I think Spurs probably concede 4, but I wouldn't be surprised if they also scored 2. So I need to remember, if I'm buying a player like Bukayo Saka, who could be a minutes risk and playing against arguably a tricky defence in Nottingham Forest, I need to think about the player that I'm selling, and I think Son could match Saka this week, especially if he is a massive minutes risk. Now, Odegaard has been on my radar, and the reason being is I don't think it's a better pick than Saka, but I do think at 2 million cheaper, he could offer fantastic value. And what it does mean is then it allows me to upgrade either Garnacho to Bruno Fernandes or Raul Jimenez to Alexander Isak. So again, I'm not sitting here saying Odegaard is better than Saka, but what would I rather have over the long term? Saka and Garnacho, for example, or Saka and Raul Jimenez, Or I could have Odegaard and Bruno Fernandes or Odegaard and Alexander Isak. Those are the combinations that we need to think about. And if Saka was ruled out for this week, I would be tempted by Odegaard, just thinking to myself, I'm going to miss out on Saka, but I do think Odegaard over the next 5 game weeks won't match Saka, but won't be too far away from him. And finally, in terms of Bruno Fernandes, I just don't see this transfer happening. I have Garnacho right now. I think the only way that I bring in Bruno Fernandes is if I were to do Son to Odegaard and then I upgraded Garnacho to Bruno Fernandes. I just don't see myself going sideways. I like him for the next 2, but with the new manager in, you are still taking a punt on exactly where he will feature in that team. So right now, at the time of recording, Son to Saka if we get positive news. If Saka's ruled out, then even though Odegaard is on the radar, I think I might just keep Son for one more game week in a fixture that I think they can score goals and then actually make a decision in game week 13. So finally, before we go into my game week 12 team selection, I really want to show you these graphics from Rob T FPL over on Twitter /BlueSky. If you don't follow him, please do. A lot of us content creators use his graphics. Hopefully he doesn't mind, but I'm sure the exposure is only a good thing. So thank you, Rob, for the graphic. And if anybody doesn't follow him, make sure you do over on Twitter /BlueSky. So first of all, I want to take a look at the projected goals and clean sheet odds going into this weekend. These are taken from SpreadX, which is basically the betting market. And I really do think when we are making decisions, it is worth checking where the money is going, because that usually is a good indicator long term on certain results, and it really does help in terms of this game week in isolation, the teams that we're targeting and whether they actually are worth bringing in. Because when we take someone like my situation where I'm looking to sell Son potentially and buy an Arsenal asset, let's take a look at the game right now. So Man City versus Spurs, we can see 2.5 projected goals for Man City, which is massive. Anybody that owns Erling Haaland right now, you'll know that is why I have been quite bullish on keeping him this game week. I do think Spurs are there for the taking. We know, obviously, Romero and Van de Ven. But we look at Spurs here, 1.28 projected goals. Now, that doesn't scream a lot of goals, but my own interpretation of that game is going to be that there is going to be goals from both teams. So even though this doesn't necessarily back it, my own assumption is that there will be goals. So we have to read into that what you will. Now, I want to take a look at the Arsenal game, for example, 2.2 projected goals. So when we look at this right now, basically nearly double that of the Spurs game. And it does make me think that doing Son to Saka or Odegaard probably does make a lot of sense for this game week in isolation. Now, of course, I am quite surprised at that because Forest have been a great defence this season, but clearly away from home, the bookies don't fancy it. And I do think right now, Arsenal are a good long-term investment. So this is why it's really important just to take a look at where basically the numbers are going. So taking a look at some other outstanding games quickly. Chelsea looked like the big game, 2.3 projected goals. And then, of course, we have got Liverpool at 2.65. That is the big one right now because a lot of managers are sat there with Cole Palmer, Mo Salah, deciding what direction to go with their teams. Now, I've been quite clear with this, that I think if Mo Salah doesn't travel with Egypt, which he hasn't, he is the best captain this game week. I do think Cole Palmer probably has that higher ceiling. We've seen him get those hat tricks, those 4 goals. But I think Mo Salah right now, in the way that he is, the way that he's accumulating bonus points and the way that Liverpool are playing, I just feel like he's the safe captaincy pick. But anybody that's looking to go Cole Palmer, based on this right here, you can't really knock it. He still is a fantastic pick this week. Outside of that, just a few other fixtures that I want to touch on. Newcastle right now, 2.2 projected goals. West Ham 1.03. So anybody that's looking to invest in maybe the combination of Alexander Isak and Lewis Hall, I think that's a really good fixture to do so this week. And as I mentioned, if I was to take a -4, Alexander Isak would come in this week, and I really do like him with this West Ham game, with Lopetegui looking like a man who is going to get sacked in any moment right now. Outside of that, don't really think there's too much to touch on in terms of the games. The overview is that Chelsea, Liverpool look like there's going to be lots of goals in that game. Man United, difficult one to predict, but obviously right now it looks good. And I think Man City are on for a big score against Spurs. Now, the final thing I want to pop up on the screen is going to be the player-specific projected goals. Just a quick coverage here in terms of captaincy. Erling Haaland top at 0.94. He's always top of these things, and he's going to continue to be. So anybody that's going without Erling Haaland, we're not sitting here saying that we think Haaland's terrible. That is far from it. It's more of a case of what combination can you get to match Erling Haaland. And right now it's been going well, but I think there is going to be a week where Haaland gets his inevitable hat-trick, and we are all going to be crying in the corner when we don't own him. But Haaland remains an amazing option, and I would be tempted to captain him. But with Salah being at 0.8 projected goals, I do think with that bonus point accumulation that he's getting, being a midfielder, he is the standout captaincy pick this week, and I would have him over Cole Palmer as I discussed. But just take a look at these players. Alexander Isak, 0.8 projected goals, looks fantastic. Nicholas Jackson, a little bit off Nicholas Jackson because of the 4 yellow cards and the potential of Nkunku coming in later down the line in that busy Christmas period. Watkins, again, fantastic fixtures, always in and amongst it, 0.56 projected goals. And of course, the thing we need to consider long term is Champions League football. But for this specific game week, he looks great. The other one that I want to raise, of course, is going to be Raul Jimenez, 0.5 projected goals. He would be the man that I would sell for Alexander Isak this week for a -4. When I take a look at these numbers here, I think to myself, the -4 could be great long term, but for this game week in isolation might not be wise. And then Bukayo Saka sat there at 0.47, dependent on, of course, whether he features or not. But of course, these are taken from Rob T FPL. Make sure you do follow him, and it's good to see the numbers for games and players. So moving into my Game Week 12 team selection, first up the goalkeeper and defence. Now, last week I had a howler with my goalkeeper selection. Started Sells thinking that was the better defence, which it was. But of course, Fabianski was the one who walked away with a 9-pointer. This week, I would be happy with 2 points. We got Fabianski away against Newcastle, Sells away against Arsenal. There's only one winner here, and both of them are losers, let's be real. Fabianski is going to be the man between the sticks. Hopefully, he can maybe pick up a penalty save and get me a ridiculous haul, but I think it is going to be terrible, whichever one I play. Now, in terms of the defenders, you will see the first transfer will be made. I will be selling Trent for Gabriel. I spoke about this. Even if we get a positive update from Arne Slot regarding Trent, I just think it's a game that we are naturally going to see reduced minutes with some big fixtures on the horizon for Liverpool. And I think I would love to have Trent, but at 7 million, I just cannot justify the price point right now. And I've looked at different options. I've looked at being a bit different, going down all the way to Lewis Hall, potentially going to a Chelsea defender. I just got to go safe. And when I say safe, I also mean the best pick. Yes, Arsenal have been very indifferent with their defensive numbers and clean sheets over the opening 11 game weeks, but I think the time is now to invest in Arsenal, and I think Gabriel is still the best pick for both clean sheets and attacking potential, and I just feel happy having an Arsenal defender back in my team, and it frees up an additional 1 million, which is worth noting. Outside of that, we got Dalot away against Ipswich. A little bit worried about his minutes, but I have to start him regardless for that game. And Anderson at home against Wolves. I prefer him over Aït-Nouri away against Fulham. And of course, Van den Berg, who is probably going to lose his spot at any point in that Brentford team. So the back three and goalkeeper pretty much pick themselves. And Trent to Gabriel is 99.9% happening Saturday morning or Friday night. Moving into my Game Week 12 midfielders, and as you can see, right now, at the time recording, the plan is to do Son to Bukayo Saka. Now, as I mentioned, I've given you the different situations. If we get news that Saka is fit, he comes in. I just don't overthink it and get the double up of Gabriel and Saka, because I know long-term, over the Christmas period, those are the players that I want to own. But if we get news that Saka is potentially not available, that's probably going to come from more insider knowledge on Twitter or Blue Sky than Arteta's lips, let's be real. Then I think I probably would keep Son for the away game against Man City and then reassess in game week 13. And I give myself just that breathing room to decide exactly which player to go for. But at the time recording, Saka is going to come in. But again, it is completely injury dependent. Now, the rest of the midfield right now, Salah obviously in, Cole Palmer and Mbeumo. No worries right now about Mbeumo and Palmer's minutes after what we know in terms of them training. The big one is going to be Garnacho. Now, once I reveal the whole team, I'll talk about the potential decision that I need to make with him. But as of right now, he is starting. But I am aware, went away international duty, new manager in Amorim, no idea where he plays. And even though I wildcarded him into my team, I feel like already he is a big mistake and a problem that I need to rectify. But is it going to be this game week? Based on these intended transfers, he will be sticking around for at least one more game week. But That's the midfield. Let's touch on them forwards. So moving into my game week 12 forwards, and as you can see, I've got the combination of Cunha and Raul, who do play against one another. Now, in terms of Raul Jimenez, such a cheap option. This was the game that I really wanted to play him in, because even though I have a Wolves defender in 8 Norway, I really don't rate the Wolves defence in general. And we saw in those projected goals that Raul Jimenez actually looks really good at 0.5 projected goals. And I always feel confident of a Raul Jimenez goal or an assist at home. So that is one thing that I need to consider of this potential -4 that I might do. I will touch on that in a minute. But Raul Jimenez at home against Wolves, I think that's an absolutely perfectly good play. But then I've got Cunha away against Fulham. Now, as you can see on the bench, I do have Visser away against Everton. Now, my own thought process right now is that I think that is a really, really bad fixture for Brentford. I just think Everton are going to make it a terrible game. And I'm in my head picturing an Everton clean sheet now. I might be a little bit biased here because I might be thinking to myself, I want to bench Visser. But I don't rate Brentford away from home. I think they are Jekyll and Hyde. When they're at home, they score 3 or 4 goals. When they're away from home, they're pretty damn woeful. And I just feel like there is a chance that I want to bench Visser because the fixture is not ideal. And I would rather play Cunha, even though he plays up against one of my defenders. Because if it is going to be a Fulham clean sheet wipeout, then Cunha is going to be at the heart of it 100%. Now, in terms of my team selection, as I've spoken about, it's not only a case of do I start Cunha or Visser, it's actually a case of do I start Garnacho, because as I mentioned, him being away on international break, if I feel like he is a massive minutes risk, and I actually do think he is a massive minutes risk, then it probably just makes sense for me to bench Garnacho and start Visser and change the structure of this team to a 3-4-3. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Hopefully we'll get some updates closer to the time, but the only reason why I'm starting Garnacho is a bit of a pride thing because I put him in my wildcard team for this fixture. And if I bench him, I start to ask myself, why did I actually own him? So right now, Garnacho's in, benching Visser. Let me know in the comments, am I being a fool doing that? Otherwise, what I can do is flip that and start Visser. I'm going to touch on captaincy, and then finally I just want to show you a different team if we were to get news that Bukayo Saka's ruled out, and of course the -4 that is still on the cards. So game week 12 captaincy, I haven't actually really overthought this. It's been Mo Salah since game week 12 arrived 2 weeks ago. I just think Cole Palmer is a phenomenal option. But it's the lunchtime kickoff, remember, on a Saturday. Salah playing on Sunday. So we have to remember, another day's rest for these Liverpool players. Another day's training for them. I think Cole Palmer is phenomenal. And I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if he was to bag a hat-trick in that game. But I just feel more confident going for Mo Salah right now in this Liverpool team. I think Southampton are a worse team than Leicester. So when I put all these things together, I think Liverpool have got the better fixture. And they've got an additional day off. And Mo Salah is just in phenomenal form. I just feel more confident going for Mo Salah. And obviously the projected goals also backed that. So Salah for me is the one. Cole Palmer vice-captain makes a lot of sense. And that is pretty obvious for me. In terms of the transfers I mentioned, Trent to Gabriel happening. It is just all about whether I sell Son for Saka. Let's take a look at the potential -4. And then let's end this video off. So as I mentioned, there are 3 different variations that I still could take this team depending on those injury news. So Gabriel coming in for Trent is just absolutely locked in all the potential moves that I make. I just feel like long term that is the play. Now, I showed you the Gabriel Saka combination. That is my #1 pick. That probably is going to be the moves that I make. But let me show you the alternatives. So this team here is just using one of the free transfers. If we get the news that Bukayo Saka is a major doubt, then as I mentioned, I think Son away against City is absolutely fine. And I would put out a team something like this. Again, Visser might come in for Garnacho, hence why I've played this. And it would give me 1.5 million in the bank. And then going into game week 13, it would just allow me to be a bit more flexible in my team and decide exactly what direction to go. Again, Garnacho could be a problem. So maybe getting rid of him in game week 13 is better than doing it in game week 12 as an example. So that's a potential direction. Just do the Trent to Gabriel move and save the other transfer. Now, the next option that I do have is a bit more aggressive, and that is actually taking a -4. And this is about bringing in a premium forward into this draft. So Trent to Gabriel, as I mentioned, downgrading Son to Odegaard. Again, that only really happens if I get news that Saka is a doubt. And then getting rid of Raul Jimenez for Alexander Isak. I can't really get rid of Cunha right now. I just don't think it is the time. And I love Visser for game week 13 at home against Leicester. So reluctantly, Raul Jimenez probably would be the player that I would get rid of to bring in Isak. For a -4, Son versus Odegaard, I don't love it. I think I could be quite close in points. And then Raul Jimenez versus Isak. I think Raul could still do well. So the more I think about this as a -4, I don't love it, but it would allow me to bring in Isak long-term in part of my team structure. The final draft, and this one's really rogue again, I do the Trent to Gabriel move, but then I do 2 midfield moves. And I get rid of Son for Odegaard once again, but then I bring in Bruno Fernandes for Garnacho, a player that I do think long-term is going to be a problem in my team. Bruno would be very much just a 2-game week thing, and then I'll reassess him, and that is my major doubt. Do I just get rid of one Man United player, Garnacho, for another, and then Garnacho suddenly becomes the go-to player? And because of that problems, I just think I got to stick with Garnacho. And if I'm going to sell him, I can't go to another Man United player. So even though this draft is tempting, I think the first option in terms of going for Saka and Gabriel, or just going for Gabriel and rolling the other one, probably makes the best sense. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 12 team selection video. As you can see, I am so certain on one of the moves, a little bit less so on the second. I will be doing a deadline live stream tomorrow, and I feel like we're going to get some news regarding Arsenal. So if you want to stick around for that, make sure you do, of course, subscribe to the channel and like this video if you did enjoy it. I will see you tomorrow morning. Any questions, pop them in the comment section. See you then. Cheers.